Hello, and welcome to Crafting a Revolution. I'm your co-host, Katie Thompson. Here we share interviews with female and non-binary makers of all kinds from all over the world. I'm also the creator of the Women of Woodworking Project and Pen and Chisel, a journal created to highlight the work and stories of underrepresented voices in craft. Today, our guest on Crafting a Revolution is artist and woodworker Valerie Berlage. Valerie creates her colorful jewelry designs and exquisite mirrors and larger wall hanging pieces in her home studio outside of Asheville, North Carolina. Today, we'll talk about her creative background and some exciting recent collaborations. First, I'd like to make a huge shout out to our patrons on Patreon. Thank you to Lee at Lee Runyon, Annette at 513 Woodworks, yours truly, Katie Thompson at Women of Woodworking, Kevin at Lefty's Woodshop, Christy at Twisted Twine, Jeremy at Jeremy Speck, Sammy at Go Samalee, Rachel at Moody Makes, Bonnie at Tool Mom Bonnie and toolmomstore.com, Laura at Oakley Soap Company, Brandy at Studio Abe, Lee at The Rainbow Carver, Ellen at Little Bear Furniture, and Ethan at Ethan Carter Designs. If you'd like to become a patron, hop on over to Patreon and sign up, support the podcast. Thank you so much for tuning into Crafting a Revolution. This episode, we have Valerie Berlage with us. Valerie, thank you so much for joining us.
And thanks for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here today.
Valerie is, if you're not watching this and listening, a very colorful artist, woodworker, designer. I'm admiring her outfit here and the color palette going on. But based out of North Carolina?
Yes. Yeah, in Leicester, North Carolina, just outside of Asheville.
Wonderful. I was about to say Asheville, but I couldn't remember for certain. So, and then of course, living in the Carolinas and as rurally as some of us do, you just say like the nearest big town or city somebody might recognize. You're like, yeah, I live outside of Charleston. So whatever that could be.
Yeah.
So, well, awesome. Well, Valerie, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, starting from the beginning. When did your creative journey start?
A long time ago. I was born into a really creative family. My grandmothers were artists. My grandfather's a woodworker. My mom was always sewing stuff when I was a kid. And excuse me, it's always been part of my background. So yeah, always been making, always been creative. And I graduated high school, and I think I was like one of 3 people that didn't want to immediately move away. I stayed here and went to UNCA, went through the fine arts program, and then decided I was never going to be able to make a living as an artist. So I went, which is not high on my list of priorities. It doesn't seem like nowadays. But I went back to school and got my teaching license, only to discover there's not many art teaching positions available. So just continued on working and trying to make things. And I worked for a woodworker for probably just over a decade on and off, and decided I needed to get my teaching license renewed. So I went back to school to Haywood Community College and went through the professional crafts program, the wood program there, and decided that was it, man. This is what I'm doing now. So I've been focusing on this now for 8 years. So not too long, but longer than I thought, actually.
I think the same whenever I'm like, oh gosh, I've been doing this over a decade. For some reason, that's like a big, you get into double digits. You're like, wow, a decade. And first, then you're like, oh, I'm old,
Yeah.
like, I remember just like starting out and being a young artist and thinking I knew everything and clearly didn't. But another thing, that's really interesting about your story is I too, grew up very creatively and knew I always wanted to do something creatively. But going to College of Charleston, I thought I need to get something practical, something that I can actually like have a career with. And I
Yeah.
took like one semester of education courses, and I was like, they get up too early for me. Like, this is not gonna work. So we all eventually find our path. But isn't it very interesting? I'd like to hear more about your experience as an artist and a teacher. How has that been? Has there been any overlap? Because it seems like, especially in the woodworking world, but in the craft world in general, there's a big emphasis on education, not learning, but also sharing your knowledge.
Yeah. So I I love sharing what I do, and I'm always happy to do that. I'd love to teach more in the future, but there are opportunities right now that I have to do that even more. Like I'm involved with our local community center, and I host a community art night once a month where we do some sort of art or craft project. I'm also involved with the I'm in the Southern Highlands Craft Guild, and I'm a member of the education committee. And I'm really involved in more of the outreach of that, because it's so important, to um, to s- to continue this. I feel like uh, we've got this momentum going as artists and crafters. People are becoming more interested in it, and I feel like it's so important to spur that on, especially for these younger kids who are just, from the womb have had their face in a phone or an, you know, iPad or whatever. So yeah, it's anything I can do to get craft and art out there. I am all up for it.
That's awesome. And I agree with you. I think we live in a very exciting time. Of course, I'm looking at it as, from a lens of, women and underrepresented identities, in woodworking and craft. But you're right. I think this is a unique time. I think this has been such a stressful time for people that they've turned to art, music, creativity, movies. We've really, unfortunately have tried to find ways to escape our current situation, or even just kind of put it on pause for a moment. And that's the wonderful thing about art and creativity, is it does allow you to kind of, you know, just really be present in the moment and not focus so much on what's going on the outside, and even just giving that gift to people, if it's something as small as them just, getting a sketchbook and letting themselves, or a coloring book even, and just expressing themselves that way. That's a real gift to give to other people. And as much as I thought I did not, teaching wouldn't suit me, it's incredibly fulfilling. And I'm sure even your experiences, at the community center, and I want to have a community craft night. That sounds incredibly fun. I'm like going to have to talk to you and figure out how I can get one. You know me, I want to do everything. So
Yeah.
that sounds super fun though. So, what did it take, going a little bit deeper here? Um, when you're starting out as an artist and kind of finding your voice, and it sounds like you again grew up in a very creative household and were encouraged to express yourself that way, but there is, kind of a big step that you take in becoming an instructor, becoming, someone that leads and organizes things. That's just not something that every artist has a personality for. What was it that finally you were like, okay, I want to implement these things? Was it, being in your shop by yourself a lot, or, what really was it that pushed you to engage the community? And then, of course, with the Craft Guild, your position on the education committee there, what was finally like, all right, I got to get out of here? What was that like?
I don't know. I think a lot of us crafters are alike in that we want to see our craft continue on. You know, it's really important that things don't die, because it just seems like sometimes it's like one generation away from losing these skills and this information. So I think it's just you know, I was always being taught things growing up. Like my grandmothers were teaching me things, my grandfather, my mom. I was always being taught, and I don't know, I guess that just kind of rubbed off to where you know, I want to share what little knowledge I have. You know, if you can share that and spark something, then that's pretty awesome.
I agree. I think that's another beautiful gift that you give when you teach, is you give people the experience of seeing what it's like to be a teacher, you know, and like in receiving, you also learn about giving, and it's just really beautiful. And I think, you know, of course, if it really takes to you as an artist and a person, it just kind of perpetuates wanting to continue to share and continue to receive, and that's just really positive and really growth oriented. You know, and that's the sad thing about arts and crafts education, especially living in the rural South. I'm sure you can understand, you know, the resources here are minimal, even compared to other places in the country that are really operating on a shoestring. It's just not something that's really I feel like generationally has been incredibly celebrated or cultured. I feel like, you know, especially where I live, like agriculture is a big focus. So there's always this like cultural focus on things being practical. And, you know, even from what people do, it's just like hard to understand, like doing something just for the fun of creativity. Sometimes I feel like I really do kind of stand out because I just and being an artist in general. But again, I wonder how many students and how many children are out here. I don't live far from where Jasper Johns grew up, and just knowing his experience and his opinion on growing up, you know, where he did, and you know how it shaped his work and what he does now. It really resonates with me, because I think, you know, how many students out there, how many kids out there, you know, have this desire, have this urge, want to draw, want to sketch, don't have the resources, don't have the emotional support. You know, even just being an artist with a very supporting family that still wants you to make a living can be difficult. You know, we all have our you know, burdens that we carry, and different hurdles that we have to cross. But just that exposure it really can, you know, take people so much further. And I love that you're doing things in the community to be able to share that with folks. And I feel like you have done a few classes elsewhere. Am I thinking you've done a few virtual classes here in the last year or so?
I did one virtual class. Well, it was a 2-part class last summer through Focus and Arts, which was really fun. I loved, I liked the virtual aspect more than I thought I would, especially since their Zoom coordinator handled all the technology bits for me. But it was nice to be able to have people from all over take part. So that was, it was great. Yeah.
That's awesome. And you've attended a few of our Women of Woodworking affinity group meetings, and it's just been wonderful how we've been able to reach out and finally connect through technology. We did before, but now it's like everybody's really focused on it. So I feel like it's opened a lot of opportunities and experiences for people that we might not have otherwise had.
Hey makers, today's episode is sponsored in part by toolmomstore.com. At toolmomstore.com, you can find any and all tool-based merchandise for all genders, all sizes. They've got mugs, they've got shirts, all kinds of cool stuff. I have one of the shirts myself that has the hashtag Woodworker on it. And I also have a couple of the mugs that define what and who is a tool chick. So super excited with the merchandise that I have. I know that you will be satisfied as well. And also, great discount for those of you who listen to the podcast. At checkout, if you enter the code MAKERMOM, you will get a 20% discount off any of the merchandise that you buy. So that's just toolmomstore.com. All right, let's head back into the action.
But this is a good way to segue into a little bit more fun side of things, which is your work was so colorful, so lovely. I own a pair of your earrings. They're some of my favorites. And a lovely thing about wood that most people don't realize is if you pick the right materials, they're actually really light. So they're so comfortable and colorful. And I would just love to hear about how you got to the point that you're making these, gorgeous pieces of jewelry using paint, using color, and using wood mixed materials. How did you get to this point creatively?
Well, I think coming from especially a creative family, like artists and crafters, like we're kind of hoarders. You know what I mean? Like we don't get rid of stuff.
Busted.
So like because you think, well, I can use that for something else, or I can, on down the road I'll use that. And so the jewelry was kind of a way to just utilize like those tiny scraps instead of throwing away, because I really can't stand to see any wood thrown away. It is a precious resource, and it is renewable, but it's not that fast of renewable. So I don't like to see any tiny little scrap be thrown into the wood fire or the landfill, and they're just fun to. It's more immediate than the big stuff too. Also, you can make a little earrings in like a week, whereas a big mirror might take a few months. So
yeah, that's what loved your, wall hangings and things like that. But when I saw your jewelry, I thought, oh, yay, it's just a great way to make art more accessible for the maker and then also the customer. There's so many people that, really want to have some of your work or just something that you've made. And so I was glad I saw, I think it was like an Instagram post. I was like, those are mine. just snagged them. So, but speaking of jewelry, also, am very excited to see the results and seeing a little bit of the sneak peeks of your collaboration with Pam Robinson. We were mentioning Pam before we got started, but tell me how that came to fruition.
I haven't seen anything, so I am super excited to see what she creates. But she saw an Instagram post of just like a handful of pieces. I always try to keep a handful of tiny little pieces going all the time, just because it's a great way to use up leftover paint. You can fill in some time while you're waiting for something else to dry. So I had a handful of these colorful little pieces that were destined to be pendants and whatnots. And she reached out, and I'm very excited that she did, because she's an amazing artist. So
yes, she was actually our guest on here, I think 2 episodes ago, and her work and technique are just so beautiful. So to have that combined, with your color and expressiveness, like I really cannot wait to see. And I think you posted a picture of maybe some of the pendants and things, and even just on their own, I was like, those are just pretty, like by themselves. So I can only imagine after Pam gets a hold of them, what they're going to turn into. So, why do you think you're so passionate about wood specifically? Is that an influence from your grandfather and just growing up around that? And you mentioned, I think when you were graduating, you were, into art, or, were thinking about being an artist. What really sold you on wood as your primary material?
I have a very early memory of selling sawdust in my grandfather's garage shop. It's always appealed to me. I like I said, I worked for a woodworker. I grew up around it. It's a really tactile medium. Like it's just like when you see a wood piece, you want to reach out and touch it. And that's not the way with some other mediums. But you can, I mean, it's just so versatile. Also, you can bend it, you can cut it, you can shape it, you can glue it, you can sandblast it, you can paint it, you can do just about anything except, stretch it back out once you cut it too short. So yeah.
Yeah, and then even mentioning paint, like doing the different layers of paint and texture, a lot of things that you do in your work. Even going back and like adding little details, like I love all the dots and stripes and just all the extra care that you go into really giving each piece like personality. That's the thing I really love about your work, is even the tiniest pieces are just like so full of personality. It's just really lovely to see. And then of course in jewelry, very stunning, but the large pieces as well. I can imagine that gets pretty time consuming, the getting into the techniques and some of the finishing that you do.
It does. Like 20% of the way into one of those big pieces, I'm like, why can't I just do like,
did it again?
Some clean line, mid-century modern, or like some live edge, more rustic stuff. But no, I have to go and make everything complicated. But it's really fun. But I will say, like, the finishing aspect of it is, it's my least favorite part, probably.
Wow.
Because it's just it's the final bit, but it just, it seems to just take so long. I could make it easier on myself, I'm sure. Like, does everything really need 3 coats and then a coat of paste wax? Probably not, but it just feels so nice after all that work. So
3 coats, it's the same thing. I mean, we kind of have a joke about it now, me and my husband, because when I was first learning, I was like, does it really have to have 3 coats? He's like, trust 3 coats. 3 coats, that's it. Like, I can't explain it. It's got to have 3 coats. And that's just like our rule here is a minimum of 3 coats. So I totally feel you on that. But for most people, like, the finishing process is like their favorite part. So it's interesting to hear from different artists and, what stands out to you and what doesn't. And I also love, just the relationship that wood and woodworking have with time. The world we live in is like so rushed and so busy, but this is a craft, like, it takes what it takes. Like, it's, and it is really humbling. But it's really, again, nice to like have it take you out of that rat race for a little while. So yeah, and I love hearing about your method about having like a lot of different things going at a different time. Sometimes working on one piece can trigger, an idea for something else, or if you're stuck on something, just going in a different direction for a little while is nice. So how many pieces do you think you're working on at one time generally? Too many?
Yeah, probably too many. Because sometimes you'll leave things for a few weeks or a month or so, just to because you need to think about them. I made some small cases a couple months ago, and they're still sitting in my paint studio because I still have not decided what kind of feet I want to put on them. So yeah, usually a handful of things going at once. So
yeah, I feel you on that. And it's just very interesting, and I always love to hear about artists and makers that let themselves have that time and space. Again, like, things are so rushed. And as we were setting up this conversation, talking about shows and selling and things like that, and enjoying that side of the process, even when things aren't always so great, it's just a lot of pressure. What are your kind of thoughts on, selling? What is that like for you, as an artist maker, someone who's chosen a life that's a little bit more slower than others? What is your approach on retail and sales?
Well, I told someone again Saturday, like I think all artists have to be a little bit of a gambler, to be crazy enough to do this.
Fair.
Because you never, like, you just, I mean, at least I don't ever know. I can guess sometimes, and sometimes I'm way off, and sometimes I'm like, okay, that panned out just how I thought. But yeah, there's always like that voice in the back of your head that's like, sell, you gotta sell, you gotta sell, you gotta sell. And I try and just like squash that down as much as I can, because it just makes me crazy. So yeah, I'm trying to take a more chill approach to that. And I don't do mini shows at all anymore because it was too stressful. Now I put my work in the hands of very capable galleries, and that is doing much better for my sanity.
Mental health there.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I hear you on that. Doing the shows and markets, it took a long time, even being from a marketing and PR background, like I totally understand what you mean about that voice to sell. It's like, I'm here to sell. I'm here to sell. Like I'm looking at dollars. But it is so important to take, I think, a laid back approach sometimes, or maybe a more rounder approach of everything that's going on. It's an opportunity to network. It's an opportunity to get out of your shop and just enjoy being around folks, especially now as people have kind of been even more secluded lately.
Yeah.
But realizing that it's like one small piece of a bigger picture, because I've definitely had, like I said, I've had shows, I've had complete goose eggs, and you're like, wow, the humiliation is just nothing like it, and
Yeah.
it's, and everybody gets rejections and things like that. And then there's some shows you're thinking, oh, this is just my little neighborhood, pop-up thing, and you end up, selling out. But sometimes you figure it out and sometimes you don't. But it's always interesting to hear what works for artists and what doesn't. Being in furniture, you talk about gambling. I mean, going to especially really big shows, a lot of upfront cost, and you're like, I've got to sell, this many pieces that are already, higher ticket items. It really does feel like gambling. So I'm pleased to hear that galleries and that type of setup has worked for you. I think it's really up to people to try different things and see what works best. And we're lucky to live in an area that does have a lot of smaller markets and opportunities for folks to get out and reach out to people. So you said you've been doing this for about 8 years. How long have you been, kind of selling your work at markets and things like that? Was that something you started doing right off the bat, or did you feel like you had to build up to that?
I was trying to think. So I started doing a few shows in the summer of 2014, and I think I got picked up by one gallery maybe that fall, and it turned out not to be a great fit, but it's one of those things you have to live and learn, I think, sometimes. But after I got into the Southern Highland Craft Guild the following year, things kind of picked up, and I got into a few more galleries, and there have been some that have come and gone over the years, but yeah, it's been all right. And last year was a surprising year, so in a good way. Like, I never really have any expectation because
It's nice to
I'm
be
just
pleasantly surprised.
it really is. Yeah. But yeah, it's doing okay. And hopefully things will just continue to improve. I mean, I guess that's what we all want.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you brought up a great point of, like, sometimes doing these shows, it does get you out there with galleries and in front of people, it does lead to other things. And so it is a lot of hard work though. Oh my gosh. So much
It
hard
is
work.
definitely. Yes.
Today's episode is sponsored by Athena Outfitters. Athena Outfitters is a quality workwear brand for hardworking women that sells everything badass beauties need to get the job done, from work boots to basics. They curate the toughest essentials made to help you perform. Every piece is handpicked to seamlessly slide right into your daily lifestyle, from rugged and roguish weekday wear to effortless weekend flair. You can fill your closet with gear that can do it all. So for Christmas, I ordered my wife like a very nice pair of slippers from Athena Outfitters, and she loves them. Loves them so much that she has accidentally gone to the gym and the grocery store in them because they seem to never leave her feet. So definitely a place to go check out, go get the goods that help you not only out in the shop, but just in your daily work around the house and outdoors. As a listener of the podcast, you can go to Athena Outfitters website and use coupon code MM, as in M&Ms, 15 for 15% off any purchase. So again, you go to athenaoutfitters.com and use the code MM15 and get 15% off of your purchase at checkout.
And I realized before I started doing shows, like, I am a salesperson. My grandmother was in sales her entire life, and so I would, she would come to shows and she would be chatting with the customers, and I'm like hiding in the back. In the back. So yeah, it's not yeah.
Yeah,
Stressful.
Yeah, some people just have that natural gift for it, and I can feel you with that on the sales. And also, like, it's different, I think, when you're selling things like cars or another product, when it's your own work, like, it feels even more pressure and things like that. But I love hearing about your grandmother. You have to give her some commission on her sales, it sounds like.
Yeah, she was always well decked out in jewelry. that was her commission. She got first dibs of everything. So
There you go. Which is, hey, that's quite a perk, I would say, when it comes to your work. I wouldn't turn that down. I'll come work a booth for a couple hours one of these weekends, and
I would be happy to let you.
Oh, well, this kind of is a good segue again to another question. Speaking of women and the influence that they've had on our lives, how does it feel, crafting, working, and making in this space, as you identify as a woman woodworker, artist? What's that been like for you?
It's good. I mean, to be honest, when I was at Haywood, I was the only, well, I was the only girl in the second year students. There was one other in the first year students. So, you know, I was aware of being the only female in the shop. But I didn't really realize, I didn't really think of myself as a woman woodworker until somebody brought it up when I was graduating, and he was like, oh, I'm going to bring my daughter to the grad show to see, you know, what, you know, a woman can actually be a woodworker and do these things. And in my head, I'm like, why would she have doubt? Like, why would she have doubts that she couldn't? And I think that was just a product of my upbringing. Like I have been really blessed in my upbringing and the support I've had from my family. And they've never said, woodworking, why would you want to do that? That's for boys, or, you know, like it's never been a thing. But I am aware, like it's, you know, it's really, I don't take it for granted now. Like it's special to me, you know, that I can be a female and a woodworker. And it's really nice to see more women in the field. I think Instagram especially has been a great way to build community like that. You know, networking, not just in your own community, because I know female woodworkers here in Asheville, but there's so many out there. So it's nice. Yeah.
Yeah, that's I'm with you on that, because I'm the same way, as far as I've never like doubted being able to do something. You know, it was always kind of confusing to me when someone would say, well, you're a girl, you can't do that. I'm like, well, why? Like, no, that doesn't, I'm doing it right now and you're telling me I can't, like, that doesn't make sense to me. And so I've always had that mentality too. And, you know, very fortunate, and, you know, through life experiences and people just to really encourage me to not give up. Always, I'm really grateful, because, you know, you can be in a room full of people that are like, well, why are you doing that? Like, that's weird, like art, creativity. But having that one person that's like, don't stop doing this, this is amazing, you know, just really encouraging you, that can really make all the difference. And it makes a difference, you know, who you're hearing that from, and actually being able to see yourself in an industry. I think that's something we're really fortunate as you know, women in woodworking right now, is we are able to have tools like Instagram where we can reach out all over the world and see what everyone else is doing and making. And it's amazing to see how our cultural, despite our cultural differences and the different types of work that we make, that we do really all have this, you know, universal experience of being a woman in a wood shop, or, you know, a gender nonconforming person, underrepresented identity. It's just this understanding. And I joke, like, I get really spoiled now because all I do is work with women in woodworking. I'm like, of course there's women in woodworking. That's all that's all I talk to anymore. But I remembered the whole reason why, you know, starting that project is because I was like, there's got to be someone else out there that's having these experiences too. And it's wonderful to see and hear, you know, about your friend, like bringing your daughter and just setting that example, you know, whether or not we want to be role models or not, we are making a difference. And that's a lot of work that I don't think men really understand, is the extra pressure and like weight that comes on that. But it's beautiful when you're able to embrace that like you have. And then again, also just encourage that attitude of, well, why not? You know, why can't women be woodworkers? You know, that's wonderful that you've had that experience and are able to share that with others. Yeah, and especially working with kids is very rewarding. Just being a mom and having both of my kids doing virtual school. Of course, we're doing like crafts and art stuff all the time, and just giving them that space to be able to be themselves is huge. So that's really wonderful. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So Well, back to your creative work, what are you working on now? We talked about your collaboration with Pam and sending her those pieces, but what's ahead for you? It's early spring, so typically people are usually getting ready for shows and markets and things like that. What's spring and summer looking like for you?
I don't know that I have any markets planned. I might do another pop up at my friend's place in July, which I wouldn't mind. It's low pressure, and that's always nice. So that might be the only show, but yeah, just making. I have discovered I'm surprisingly low on boxes, so I need to get my reader in gear and make some boxes, because that's an important part of my product line. And I have plans to make a couple of things for myself this year, which is nice.
Good for you.
I'm doing it. I'm putting it on the books. And yeah, just I usually do a couple large pieces, and I've got some things planned for that. So yeah, just lots of making sawdust.
That's awesome. That's amazing. And I just realized, like, the colors you're wearing even today, like, are very reminiscent of your work. Like, you could easily be a piece of your work here. I love it.
Yeah, and I'm surprisingly well, there's a couple spots. I'm surprisingly paint free today, so usually I have it all over me.
Oh, that was another question I wanted to ask you. When did the painting come into play? Talked about the woodworking. When did you discover your love of color?
Always. Like, I didn't grow up in a house with white walls. Like, all the walls were painted. My mom loves color. Both my grandmothers love color. My one grandmother, Lauraine, my grandfather, he's the woodworker. And so Lauraine, we would paint what he made. And we did a lot of coloring when I was little. And she would always, encourage me to use all the crayons in the box. Like, even as a kid, you just have this tendency to just use like a few colors because those are, your favorite. But she would always say, no, like, there's more colors, there's all these to choose from, you gotta use all of them. And so yeah, I just that was always a part of whatever we were making and creating, was color. And I realized the other day, I just don't have any fear of it anymore, because it's just, you can just paint right over it if you don't like it. You talk to some people and it's like, oh, I'm just like, that's really bold, or I don't know if I do that or this or whatever. And it's like, just gotta go for it, man. Just like get in there and do it.
See, I needed to hear that, because I'm one of those people, I love to paint, but I stress out. I'm like, what if I don't like it? What if it doesn't? What if I screw it up? Or I'll do it and I'm like, oh, I love it, or oh, I hate it, and it ends up just causing so much anxiety. I really took to like digital painting instead, because I was like, okay, I can erase that like very quickly. For some reason, that just like felt less stressful to me, and I loved it. But I needed to hear that from you. Like, you can just paint over it and you can just go for it. And yeah, I needed that lesson for creativity in life. We could all use a little bit of that advice. Just go for it. Just go for it.
Just go for it. And even if you wind up hating it, it's like, it's a good learning process, because you learn what you don't like, what you don't think works good together. So yeah.
And that's especially true with like colors and mixing and blending and being able to create stuff, just learning what you like. I always just love talking to painters and learning about color theory and then their relationship with it too. Because you're right, there's been many times I've learned, okay, yeah, that looks like dirt. That's not what I was going for. So those colors don't work. But yeah, it is fun to play around and learn that way. But how wonderful that you were given the space to do that and the guidance too. And yeah, it's a really wonderful experience to hear about and good advice. Like I said, truly good advice for us all to just go for it, play around. There's lots of color out there.
There, there is definitely lots of color out there. Yes.
Well, Valerie, how can people see more of your work, get in touch with you? You mentioned Instagram. Please share your handle and your website and how we can see more of your work.
My handle is Lauraine Lillie Studios. I named my studio after my two grandmothers, Lauraine and Lillie. And so that's my Instagram handle. That's my Facebook handle, although I'm not real active on Facebook because I found one social media platform is plenty. More than that, it's really overwhelming. And that's my website too, laurainelilliestudios.com. So, yep.
How lovely. It's even named after your grandmother's. Like, so much women in woodworking love here. I'm feeling it.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Valerie, thank you so much for joining us and bringing color to our lives today and every day. And I can't wait to see what you make next.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you today, Katie. Thanks.
Thank you for tuning in to our interview with Valerie Berlage. I will include the links on where to follow her in the show notes for today's episode. If you don't know where to find the show notes, check out the podcast app you're listening on. In the podcast description, there should be links there, or you can find it in the description box down below on YouTube. Or you can head to freemanfurnishings.com/podcast and find this week's episode and past episodes and links there too. Be sure to follow along on Instagram at Crafting a Revolution. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to subscribe and follow. Head over to iTunes and leave a 5-star review. We sincerely appreciate the support. Thanks again for tuning in. Let's go craft a revolution.
Solution for the toxic masculinities. Pollution is the constant evolution of the